evidence, no fingerprints, just fear. You might be wondering at this point, could this just be a case of misdirection? Here is where things take an even darker turn.
Airport Drive, Bundaberg, Queensland, May 15th, 2025. A gray Hyundai iX35 turns toward the terminal. Inside sits Phoebe Bishop, 17 years old, a packed bag at her feet, a plane ticket in her hand, and Perth waiting at the other end of a flight she will never board. The car slows near the entrance. It does not stop. Detective Inspector Craig Mansfield confirmed it. The car drove past, and nobody got out. So where did Phoebe go? Welcome to Hidden Motive Crime. If you are new here, subscribe and hit the notification bell. We cover the details others leave out and the truths that deserve to be heard. Today, Phoebe Bishop. 4 facts, no pauses. 1. Phoebe Bishop had a confirmed booked flight to Perth, Western Australia. The seat was real. The ticket was paid for. She was supposed to be on that plane. 2. On the 2 adults she lived with, James Wood, 34, and Tanika Bromley, 33, drove her to that airport. They were the last people to see her alive. 3. When Queensland police searched the house Phoebe had been living in, they found 4 dead dogs, loaded firearms, and ammunition inside the walls where a teenage girl had been sleeping. 4. When her remains were eventually found near Goodnight Scrub National Park, they had not been buried. She had been left there, exposed, in the scrub. Here is the question this entire case turns on. Why, on the one morning Phoebe was finally leaving their lives for good, did they make sure she never left at all? Before we go further, drop your answer in the comments right now. Do you think Phoebe knew she was in danger when she got into that car? Gingin, Queensland. In population 1,100. 51 kilometers west of Bundaberg along the Bruce Highway. A flat, dry town where everybody knows your name, your car, and your business. Phoebe Bishop had been trying to leave it. She was 17, 180 centimeters tall, long red hair, hazel eyes. Her mother, Kylie Johnson, described her publicly as strong-willed, a girl who followed her own beat. Those words were not flattery. They were an accurate account of who Phoebe actually was. At 17, she was already working, cleaning jobs, supporting herself. She had moved out of home and was building something on her own terms, in a town that did not offer young people many rungs to climb. Her boyfriend Levi had relocated to Perth. They stayed together across the distance. The plan was straightforward. Phoebe would save enough, book a flight, and join him. Perth was not a holiday. It was the exit door she had been building toward, wage by wage, week by week. The ticket for May 15th was the result of that plan. She had booked it herself. Have you ever reached a point where you knew, with complete certainty, that a place was finished for you and the only thing keeping you going was the plan to leave it? That is exactly where Phoebe was. Tell me in the comments. The house Phoebe had been living in sat in Gingin behind an unremarkable exterior. Neighbors registered it differently. The smell reached them before anything else. Persistent, heavy, coming from inside the property. There was noise. There was an unease that people who lived nearby could not always name but consistently reported. Inside that house, James Wood, 34 years old, Tanika Bromley, and 33. And here is the thread that pulled Phoebe into their orbit. Tanika Bromley had previously worked for Phoebe's own mother, Kylie Johnson, before being made redundant in 2024. That is not a coincidence. That is a connection routed directly through family trust. Bromley was not a stranger from a sharehouse listing. She was someone Kylie Johnson had employed, someone Phoebe would have known by name and by face. That is how a 17-year-old ends up under the roof of 2 adults 15 years older than her. Not through poor judgment, but through a thread of familiarity that made the arrangement feel safer than it was. When police eventually entered that house as a crime scene, they found 4 dead dogs inside, later confirmed to have died of natural causes, alongside loaded firearms and ammunition. Those weapons were almost certainly present throughout the entire period Phoebe lived there. Queensland police later charged both Wood and Bromley with separate weapons offenses after firearms were also found in their car. Remember this: the weapons were not discovered after, they were always there. Here is a question this case demands we ask plainly. How does a 17-year-old girl end up in a house like that, with people like that, for as long as she did? Rural Queensland towns like Gin Gin do not offer young people an abundance of affordable, safe housing options. There are no apartment complexes filled with vetted flatmates. There is what is available, what someone you loosely trust tells you is available, and what you can afford on a cleaning wage while trying to save for a flight. Phoebe was not there because she lacked judgment. She was there because the circumstances of being young, independent, and living in a town of 1,100 people do not leave many alternatives. So she kept her head down. She fixed her eyes on May 15th. She did what people do when they are enduring something difficult. They identify the point where it ends, and they move toward it. But consider what she was moving through every single day to reach that point. A house that smelled strongly enough for neighbors to notice from outside. Dead animals inside. Loaded firearms within the same walls where she slept. 2 adults whose relationship to legal boundaries, as the weapons charges would later confirm, was not straightforward. Phoebe was inside that every day, saving, counting, waiting, counting. And here is the detail that changes the weight of everything. Those firearms did not appear the day she disappeared. They were there before. They were almost certainly present on every night Phoebe spent in that house. Queensland police found weapons in the Gin Gin property. They found weapons in Tanika Bromley's silver Hyundai. This was not an isolated incident. It was a pattern surrounding both Wood and Bromley that existed throughout the period Phoebe was living with them. I want to ask you something directly. If you had been in Phoebe's position, knowing what the neighbors outside that house knew, sensing what she must have sensed from inside it, would you have stayed? Or would you have found another way out sooner? Leave your answer below. Now, because I think your response will tell you something important about how survival actually looks when you are 17 and alone, and the only plan you have is 3 weeks away. At some point in the weeks before May 15th, Phoebe booked the flight. The seat was confirmed. The date was locked. She told Levi. She began packing. The kind of packing you do when you are not coming back. This was a permanent departure. 1 bag out. Nothing left behind worth returning for. Did James Wood and Tanika Bromley know she was leaving for good? They knew she was going to Perth that morning. They drove her. Whether they understood she was not returning is a question the courts will examine. But what we know is that Phoebe was packing her belongings inside a house where 2 people with loaded weapons lived, and on a timeline that was visible to everyone under that roof. The night before May 15th, Phoebe in that house, bag packed or nearly packed, ticket on her phone, the drive to Bundaberg Airport already arranged. What was said that night? What was the atmosphere in those rooms? We do not have those answers from any public record. What we have is what came next. On the morning of May 15th, 2025, Phoebe Bishop had done everything right. She had worked. She had saved. She had held on to the plan through every difficult day in that house. She had a ticket. She had a seat. She had a person waiting at the other end. Someone in that car had already decided none of it would matter. May 15th. Morning. Phoebe picks up her bag, walks out of the Gin Gin house, and gets into the gray Hyundai X35 with James Wood and Tanika Bromley. That is the last time anyone outside that vehicle sees her alive. The drive to Bundaberg Airport covers 51 kilometers, roughly 40 minutes along the Bruce Highway. 40 minutes in a car with 2 people who, Queensland police later alleged, had already decided what that morning would end with. The Hyundai turns onto Airport Drive. It moves toward the terminal. It slows. It does not stop. Craig Mansfield confirmed it publicly. The car drove past, and nobody got out. Phoebe never reached the check-in desk. She never handed over her boarding pass. The flight to Perth departed without her. Queensland police later alleged that Phoebe was killed shortly after that moment on Airport Drive. Shortly after. Which means that somewhere between that CCTV frame and whatever road came next, Phoebe Bishop's life ended. On the same morning it was supposed to change forever. There is nothing to add to that. The facts, stated plainly, are enough. The flight to Perth took off. Phoebe was not on it. In Perth, Levi waited. The arrival time passed. No message, no call, no Phoebe. Her sister Kalia went directly to the last known people with her sister and sent a message to James Wood and Tanika Bromley. 4 words. Where is my sister? Whatever response she received did not account for Phoebe. May 16th, Queensland Police issued a formal missing persons alert. Phoebe's description went public. 180 centimeters tall, long red hair, hazel eyes, last seen on Airport Drive in the company of her housemates. Kylie Johnson stepped in front of cameras and made public appeals. A mother describing her daughter to strangers. I'm trying to make Phoebe real to people who had not known her name 48 hours earlier. Within days, more than 400 missing persons posters carrying Phoebe's photograph had been displayed across the Wide Bay region. Queensland Police declared 2 formal crime scenes, the Gin Gin property and the grey Hyundai X35. Inside the house, 4 dead dogs, confirmed later to have died of natural causes, alongside the firearms and ammunition already documented. Officers named Airport Drive, Samuels Road, and the Gin Gin area as locations of interest and began mapping every meter of the geography of May 15th. On May 22nd, Detective Acting Inspector Ryan Thompson stood before the media. He did not speculate. He did not soften what he said. People don't vanish. 3 words. Every alternative explanation collapsed under them. Now I want to ask you directly. When you first heard that the CCTV on Airport Drive never caught Phoebe entering that terminal, that the car slowed and nobody stepped out? What did you think had happened inside that vehicle? Drop your theory in the comments. Because the answer, when it came, was worse than most people had imagined. May 19th. Police launched a formal ground search along Airport Drive and surrounding areas of Bundaberg. They found nothing. Not a thread, not a footprint, not a single physical trace of Phoebe Bishop beyond that CCTV frame. That level of absence is not accidental. It takes deliberate effort to leave nothing behind in a location where a person was last seen alive. May 22nd. Phone data. Queensland Police, working through Phoebe's digital records, made a discovery significant enough to expand the entire investigation. The full details remain before the courts, but this is confirmed. Someone had been using Phoebe Bishop's phone after she disappeared. Her device, containing her messages to Levi, her flight confirmation, her family contacts, had been active. And Phoebe had not been the one using it. A phone does not operate itself. Someone held it. Someone made deliberate decisions about what to do with it, with full knowledge of what had happened to its owner. May 23rd. The dive squad and specialist officers were deployed to Goodnight Scrub National Park. Land searches, waterway searches. Police dogs moving through terrain designed by nature to conceal whatever is placed inside it. May 25th. Tanika Bromley was stopped by police. Her silver Hyundai was searched. Officers found firearms and ammunition inside the vehicle. Bromley was arrested. She and James Wood were charged with separate, unrelated weapons offenses. That arrest placed Bromley directly into the legal system. It confirmed in documented, charged terms that the weapons environment surrounding these 2 individuals extended beyond the Gin Gin house and into their vehicles. Back in Gin Gin, a town of 1,100 people was processing something it had no framework for. Neighbors who had reported unease around that property for months were now watching it cordoned off as a formal crime scene. and watching a teenage girl's face look out at them from 400 posters across the region. June 4th, 2025. Queensland Police made 2 announcements on the same day. The formal search for Phoebe Bishop was suspended, and James Wood was arrested. On the same day they stopped looking for her alive, they charged the man they believed responsible for her death. June 5th. Wood and Bromley were each charged with 1 count of murder and 2 counts of interfering with a corpse. 2 counts each. That number is part of the public record, and it reflects the deliberateness of what allegedly occurred after Phoebe was killed. June 6th. Human remains were located off a back road near Goodnight Scrub National Park. Not buried. Left exposed in the scrub. June 17th. Queensland Police confirmed the remains were Phoebe Bishop. 23 days after she got into that car. July 1st, a 3rd arrest. Kieran Daniel Mittelhäuser was charged for using Phoebe's phone after her death to actively mislead the investigation. He held her phone. He used it deliberately, and with full knowledge of what had happened to her. 3 people, 1 teenager. A phone used as a tool of deception even after she was gone. Does knowing a 3rd person was involved change how you see this case? Who do you believe was the driving force? Wood, Bromley, or Mittelhäuser? The comments are yours. Kylie Johnson called her daughter strong-willed. A girl who followed her own beat. Every quality that made Phoebe who she was. The independence, the discipline, the refusal to wait for someone else to build her life, was pointed directly toward a future that was taken from her on May 15th. Kaylia Bishop eventually got her answer, not through a text reply, through a Queensland Police confirmation on June 17th. Levi and Perth waited 23 days for news that destroyed the future they had planned together. As of 2026, Wood, Bromley, and Mittelhäuser are all awaiting trial. No verdicts have been delivered. The legal process is ongoing. This case also exposes something larger. Young people in rural Australia aging into informal living arrangements that no authority monitors. Bromley was not a stranger. She was someone Kylie Johnson had employed. That family connection was the pathway in. Phoebe Bishop was not a cautionary tale. She was a girl with a ticket, a plan, and a future she had built herself. She deserves to be remembered exactly that way. Phoebe Bishop bought that ticket herself. She packed her own bag. She made her own plan. Her luggage has not been found. Her phone has not been physically located. Justice for her is still unfinished. If this case moved you, share it. Not for this channel. For Phoebe. Subscribe to Hidden Motive Crime. On next week, a case that has been sitting in silence for years. And before you go, do you believe Wood, Bromley, and Mittelhäuser each played an equal role? Or was one person the driving force? I read every single reply.